to get the Bob Quincy Award. Bob Quincy, long ago, legendary sports writer, Charlotte Observer. So TD gets his award, and he makes a very eloquent 4 or 5 minute speech. But he, unknown to me, he remained at the banquet. Most guys bounce, right? I know I would have if I could have. You get your trophy, you can give your speech, and who wants to stay around for another hour with people you don't know? Thomas Davis stayed around. So I give my speech. I was the keynote speaker. They were extremely desperate. That group of people was to hire me, but I give my keynote speech. Then they want me to take questions. This one drunked up old boy in the back of the room raises his hand. This guy with a checkered blazer, I'll never forget this red and black checkered blazer like they give you if you win the tournament down at Harbortown. He says, Mick, I want you to tell me in this crowd what effect you think the Greg Hardy situation is going to have on this team this year. All of a sudden, the room got very, very quiet. This guy's coming with a fastball, right? Before I can answer, I realize from the podium that about 6'3" and about 245 pounds of NFL linebacker has stood up, and he's reaching for my microphone. I hand the microphone down to Thomas Davis. He turns and looks at the guy. Now the room is even more quiet. Thomas Davis looks at the guy like if he could have, he would have flown across the room and twisted his head off. He said, let me tell you something. I talked to Greg Hardy just today, and I told him, Greg, all we know is what you're accused of. But you pull a Carolina Panther jersey over your head, you got to hold yourself to a higher standard than that. You're representing not only me, Luke, Cam, rest of the guys on this team, but you're representing every athlete that's ever played here and every athlete that's ever played football. And I think he got that message loud and clear.
Sure, character.
I could just about start crying right now that Thomas Davis did that. Not that he saved me, but it just speaks to the fabric of him.
Yeah.
Most guys would have left the banquet. Most guys would have just sat back in their chair and said, if they were there, and said, yeah, Mick, what effect do you think the Greg Hardy? But Thomas Davis knew he could answer that question on his worst ever day better than I could on my best ever day. On offense, it'd probably be Jordan Gross. Maybe a tie between Jordan Gross and Jake Delhomme, two of the classiest ambassadors that you will ever meet.
Okay, tell me a little bit about Jake Delhomme.
Jake Christopher Delhomme. Here's all you need to know about Jake, Will. If you want to get your rear end beat by a group of 300-pound men, then say anything bad about Jake Delhomme and let any of his offensive linemen hear you say it.
Really?
They respected him so much and they loved him so much that blocking for him was personal. Blocking for some quarterbacks is your job, right? So you try to do it.
For sure.
But Jake inspired people to want to not let him down when he played.
Okay.
Have you played with anybody that brought those emotions up for you?
Definitely. I can say for sure when we were in college, Jalen McClendon, he came in with us at NC State in the class of the Pac-14 class of 2014. And he never had really got his chance to really play for State. But the times that he did, we were always just really on his side, because he was just that stand-up guy who he never really got his chance, but he was always there and always ready whenever he was called upon. He might play in 2 of the 12 games in a season, and it might be for 4 possessions, but on those 4 possessions, you're going to get everything that you can out of Jalen McClendon. And kind of like how you were talking about, that's the character guy. And that's the type of guy that you love to have on your team, whether or not he's an A-plus player or not, But Jalen McClendon definitely was that guy.
Was he related to T.A. McClendon?
I'm not 100% sure at all. Yes, sir. But he was actually I forgot what high school, but he was a quarterback down in Charlotte. What high school was it, Cody?
He went to West Meck, I believe.
Yep, West Meck. Yep.
What'd you study at NC State, Will?
I ended up studying criminology. I started off as a communications and marketing major and switched to criminology. Ended up switching over to criminology. I want to say it was my redshirt freshman year.
With your permission, I would love to ask you and Cody both, what are your thoughts, your impressions of kind of where where we are now, some of these headlines that have been making the rounds, in NFL football, it's not life its own self, but in a way it's how we come together. Sports is kind of how we come together. So what do you guys think about kind of where we've been and where we are and where we're heading moving forward?
I think that as far as sports goes, like you said, sports has that unique ability to unite people of all different backgrounds, no matter where you're from, how much money you make, what your race is, what your religion is. It has that ability to bring people together. And you spoke on it a little bit earlier as far as the locker room. And usually the way the locker rooms are set up, people of different backgrounds are forced. You're basically forced to live together. You become a family, whether you realize it or not. And I think that as far as, everything with the coronavirus and the protests going on, it's almost been like there's kind of been a bit of a reset, if that makes sense. People are starting to examine, their own beliefs. Hey, is there anything about me that I need to change? Are there some things when I look in the mirror that I'm not proud about? And I think that it's definitely been a big conversation starter. And a lot of people have been uncomfortable, especially with the protest and the race talks and conversations. But I think for me personally, it kind of makes you do a little bit of self-reflection. And I think that, but I also think that it's good. I think that it's good for people to be uncomfortable because that's where change comes from. And that's what I believe. And I don't know if Will can attest to that or.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to it. Just kind of going off of what you said, I feel like football, sports, or whatever it is, any type of sport, they all bring us together. Like you said, people from all kind of different diversities, And I feel like both COVID and both just the racism that's going on in the U.S., I feel like it's pulling away from what football brings together. COVID is keeping us from playing football. Whereas all the race riots and all this stuff that's going on because of the George Floyd situation is pulling us apart as well. So without football being there to kind of keep us all sane, because that's what it's kind of been sounding like. Every time I go out, people's asking me yeah, well, what do you think about this? When's football coming back? And I think the main reason because is they're expecting something to get their mind off of everything that's going on. And I feel like sports, not only just football, is that gateway out of a lot of things that are going on. And it also isn't just a gateway, but it's also a bridge that leads us to being one, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever sport it is, but it leads people of different nationalities, people of different color, people of different backgrounds together. And I feel like because of COVID, we don't have that right now. And I feel like the biggest thing that we have to do is find other things to bring us together, not violently like the riots, but peacefully bring us together as one whole group and one whole unit,
I think sports it's a mental escape for a lot of people. Whether somebody's had a long day, a bad day, take race and the coronavirus out of it. If you just think back to when things were, quote unquote normal, sports for a lot of people is an escape. Sports is something that people can go to no matter how they're feeling, and maybe seeing their favorite player make a shot, make a catch, maybe seeing their favorite team win, it brings joy to their life. And, just being part of, whether that person's watching the game on TV, tailgating, at the arena, at the stadium. I think just that, that camaraderie and having something to look forward to, I think it's a mental escape and something that a lot of people are struggling to do without right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Feel the same way. One of my favorite things about game day, both at home and on the road, and I feel it more at home games because I don't know, I just do. It's home. But I adore, I'm addicted to those feelings of the stadium coming to life. Yeah. And how people of all ages, people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, people of all colors, races, believers, non, young, old, rich, poor, Wake, Duke, State, South Carolina, Clemson, ECU, they all come to get a piece of their NFL team for a couple of hours on a Sunday.
Yep.
And I love how the differences between us seem to be able to melt away during that time. And I would hate it if we had to do without that, if fans had to do without that this fall.
Yes, sir. Since we're talking about this too, I guess it's a good question for you. But since you've been with the Panthers, what do you think the biggest impact that they bring to the city of Charlotte? You know, like how does that team specifically impact the city of Charlotte?
Well, economists could tell you down to the dollar the impact that an NFL team has on a region. There are only 32 teams that have played hardball with the league and have lost their team till disappointing, just sad stories about what it took away from their region when the Baltimore Colts left, for example, when the Cleveland Browns left, for example. It's hard. NFL is big. But this is my opinion on it, to your question, Will, is that, because I've seen this with my own two eyes, the Panthers believe that there's no reason why we cannot be undefeated every year in the communities we serve. Now, it's impossible to get an autographed football, a jersey, a coach to come speak, a broadcaster to come. It's impossible to bat 1,000, but our community relations staff does an incredible job. So I think that's one of the best things we do. It's not sexy. People would rather talk about wins and losses, and we all understand that. But when you see the Make-A-Wish kid and their families come into the locker room wide-eyed, I mean, just see that one time, and it makes indelible marks on you that will never be erased.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And also, since we're on the topic as well, Mick, I want to get your personal opinion on this. With it's made the headlines here the last few days about the Jerry Richardson statue being removed. What is the aura down there and the mood in Charlotte amongst Panther fans and some of the people you've talked to about that?
I'd have probably a better answer for you if I were there, but I hadn't been allowed to come to work for a couple of months. So all that happened with me mostly in Alamance County with my wife and my married family trying to follow things from abroad. Mr. Richardson was one of the people that hired me in 2005. I feel like I owe him a professional debt for placing his trust and faith in me to come there and do the job that I've been charged with for 15 seasons now. But he does have a backstory, and that's not secret, it's public. And so I think about it from a larger perspective, and I'm nobody's sociologist. I'm just a guy, but I love people and talking and asking questions. And I'm just sitting here thinking, as you were talking, Cody and Will, what have we, what are we learning throughout all this? If Drew Brees, the great Drew Brees, is an outstanding QB, has a great reputation for work in the community. If Drew Brees could get snagged by saying the wrong thing, if people can understand now, I mean, a lot of people I know had no idea what the Black Lives Matter movement really, what the roots of it really are all about.
Yeah.
I know. And so if even a couple pairs of eyes can be opened, if people can understand that Colin Kaepernick, I think I have this is my interpretation. You guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought then and think now that Colin Kaepernick was never, and Eric Reed, they were never protesting against first responders. It was never about the military. It was never about the good old stars and bars, and it was about. They've been vindicated, I think, because it was about what we're dealing with right now, this minute in the United States of America.
And I think that you had a lot of people who, the ones that were outspoken against them, they kind of, in a way, were using the flag as like a blindfold to not speak on or not give attention to the issues that they were really protesting. And, you always hear, well, you could have done it a different way. You could have, but they did it peacefully. And, it's like you said, I think now that with everything going on, in a way, they have been vindicated in a lot of people's eyes.
I don't see any other way to interpret it. And I love the words of our head coach, Matt Rule, who said very, very eloquently that as